When we think about Louisiana, we think about the map of Louisiana. And when we think about the map of Louisiana, we think about the boot. But that image no longer reflects reality. Louisiana is losing its boot, and we have no one to blame for it but ourselves. The image of the boot serves almost as a logo for the state. It's seen everywhere on state signs, representing the letter L in words on commercial products, incorporated into logos for local companies. The Louisiana boot is what residents identify with, but unfortunately, this is no longer the case.
Every 38 minutes, approximately one football field of Louisiana's wetland is lost to the Gulf of Mexico,
says Juliana Mestri, senior wildlife biologist for the U.S. Department of the Interior Fish and Wildlife Service.
If this rate is not changed soon, Louisiana's current coastal parishes will eventually cease to exist.
As of 2006, even after Hurricane Katrina, more than 2 million people were living in coastal parishes, which accounts for about 47% of the state population. These people's homes will soon be sucked up by the rising water line, and they'll have to relocate to somewhere else. In 2003, we interviewed Cheyenne Dreyer, a woman in her early 50s who told us about her home. When you build a house, you expect your house to last 50 years. You're going to pass down your house to your kids one day. But if they don't do something about the erosion, this is not going to be here in 50 years. Because that was a field where my husband used to play, right across that cement road, and it's marshland right now. And when we built our house, you had to build 12.5 feet above sea level. Now you have to build 14 feet above sea level. The houses are so high now. The water table is coming up, but for some reason, every storm, the water just gets higher. In August of 2005, her community was completely obliterated by Hurricane Katrina. They're still rebuilding in another location in the same parish today. But the destruction of the wetlands is not just a threat to locals living in coastal areas. It's also a threat to those living much further inland. The wetlands act as a natural barrier against hurricanes. That's a known fact. When the coast is struck by hurricanes, it is the marshes and wetlands that take the brunt of the storm before it gets too far inland. In the past, it has been effective, but as more and more of the wetlands are destroyed, the effects of these hurricanes will only grow more drastic.
So Hurricane Katrina is considered the #1 most costly natural catastrophe to occur as of 2013. And to put that into perspective, it caused more than double the amount of property losses that were incurred from fires and explosions from the World Trade Center and Pentagon terrorist attacks. But you see, if we hadn't lost as much of the wetlands, the extent of the damage that Katrina caused would not have been nearly as devastating.
Right, and in addition to its effects on local populations, the storm has also become a threat to the ports at the base of the Mississippi. So the coastal wetlands also provide the storm protection for 5 of the top 15 largest ports in the United States. So that's by tonnage. And to put that into perspective, these ports are responsible for about 20% of all of waterborne commerce in the United States. So the destruction of the wetlands is not just a threat to Louisianians, it's also a threat to the entire country, and in more ways than just one. Louisiana is a sportsman paradise. Alongside the iconic boot, that phrase is advertised on almost every state license plate. But without the wetlands, this would no longer be true. The industry accounts for hundreds of thousands of jobs. There are people who go out to catch the fish, people who package the fish, ones who deliver it to grocery stores and restaurants. So many people depend on the seafood industry down there. Think back to the BP oil spill a few years ago. Its effects on the coastal wildlife populations and further effects on the fishing and tourism industry in Louisiana were devastating to the local economy. But why has all this happened? Why are the wetlands being lost to the Gulf of Mexico at such an alarming rate? Well, there's a lot at play here, so let's take a look at the history to understand some of the causes. In 1965, the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Canal, abbreviated Mr. Go, was created to provide shipping with a shorter route to the Gulf of Mexico. So that sounds like a positive thing, but let's set the facts straight. Mr. Go is responsible for 27,000 acres of land that were destroyed during its construction. It allows for the salt water from the Gulf of Mexico to enter Louisiana's brackish marshes and cypress forest, which completely wipes them out as it moves through these huge areas of land. And throw on a 20th century levee system complete with locks and dams, and you got yourself set up for a road to destruction.
This system was designed to direct drainage water from the Mississippi River straight into the Gulf of Mexico. Normally, the silt that is carried with these waters is redeposited in Louisiana's wetlands. Instead, about 160 million tons of sediment are thrown off the continental shelf each year and lost to the Gulf. With no way of getting any stronger or expanding, wetlands are instead slowly being replaced by water.
But that's not all. Louisiana is both the country's second biggest crude oil producer and refiner and the largest entry point for crude oil coming into the United States. Oil and gas companies dredge huge canals in Louisiana's wetlands and marshes to help transport these resources, but have destroyed a lot of land in the process, not to mention its effects on other plants and wildlife because of the salt water that's introduced to these freshwater wetlands from the Gulf of Mexico. The Louisiana coastline is sinking faster than any other coast on the planet, all as a result of man. Everything we do has an effect on the wetlands and the wildlife that lives there, even something as important as constructing levees to protect our own people. So why then should this come as a surprise to most? So the problem with wetland loss is that no one knows about it. There's very little media coverage on the subject, and that's because all of the effects are long-term. Think about it. If you take money out of the bank to buy a hamburger, it's not going to seem like that big of a deal. But if you keep doing that, later on down the road, it'll start affecting your bank account, your body, your health. That's essentially what's happening in Louisiana. What's happening is that all of the negative effects are popping up later on down the road. So by the time we start to pick up on what's happening, it's too late. And even those who do know about it, those who don't live in Louisiana, shrug it off and don't really think of it as a big deal. Not my problem, they think. But in actuality, it really is. Just because wetland loss does not present itself as a sudden, shocking issue or a devastating medical epidemic, that doesn't make it any less of an issue. Media coverage on wetland loss is not very widespread since it's an ongoing problem that will never really go away. But this needs to change. If every single image of the old Louisiana, the fake Louisiana, were to be replaced, it would finally draw attention to an issue that so desperately needs it. Using just the power of visual representation, the real depiction of Louisiana could generate conversation and speculation about an issue of national importance that has never really been viewed as such. It's not always easy to make someone realize that an investment in the coastal wetlands is an investment for the whole state. I mean, for that matter, an investment in the whole country, really. And that's what needs to be understood on a national level. The future of Louisiana's economy depends on just how problematic wetland loss is viewed as. No matter what we do, there's really nothing that can restore the wetlands entirely. But the more attention that is brought to the situation, the better the future of these natural ecosystems will become. Erin Reily, NPR News, New Orleans.